This is my podcast where I deep dive into matters surrounding HR tech and the future of work. I was a former HR serial entrepreneur and write extensively about the future of work on my blog. You may know me better through the Singapore HR Tech Market Map that I created in 2017. In this podcast, I speak with the people who are enabling the future of work. From mindfulness coach to employee engagement platform, they are all helping companies to better navigate rising work and business demands. I'm hoping that sharing in this podcast will help you better prepare yourself and your business for what the future of work may bring. Welcome to another episode of the Adrian Tan Show. Today I'm very happy to be speaking with my new guest, Sudhanshu Ahuja. If you have not heard of him, he is the co-founder and CEO of Impress.ai, which is a chatbot software for recruiting and HR. Impress.ai started in 2017 and has since grown to about 80 people. And they have quite a number of interesting and large customers, which you probably have heard of, companies like DBS and Singtel. And most recently, they have also raised $4 million from Seed Capital and Summit 29K. Hi, Sudh. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adrian. Happy to be.
You actually came from MAS, finance backgrounds, and you jumped straight into the recruitment assessment space. What was the motivation behind it? Is there a personal story?
There is definitely. So I grew up around entrepreneurs. So I grew up in a small town in India, in northern India, in fact, where a lot of my friends' families were business families. So I was really influenced by growing up around people who had started factories, some of them listed, some of them grew really big. And I think the thing that most influenced me was that my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, started a textiles business in his 60s. And he grew it quite big within 4 years, and he had orders from around the world, and that was really successful. So for me, the entrepreneurship story has always been about taking destiny in your own hands. And the idea of upward social mobility is key for me. So I could see that entrepreneurs, at least the way I have looked at it, of course, it has its failures, has its learnings. You fall down, you get back up again. But to me, it's a story of taking destiny into your own hands, and I've seen it be a force for upward social mobility, not just for the entrepreneur themselves, but for the other people they create opportunity for. So that was my entire inspiration. And at MAS, I had a fantastic job. I learned a lot from my boss. I still keep in touch with him. It taught me how to work. But at the back of my mind, there was this dream, starting something, doing the things that I'd grown up around. And I thought my risk is quite low. I was just starting out my career, didn't have much of a salary, didn't have too many responsibilities. I just had to pay for myself. And I always had the comfort that if everything falls apart, I can go back home and my parents will feed me and let me live in their house. So I had that mental security. I was always more comfortable with risks than many people around me. And I thought if I were to do something, it's either early in my career or much later in my career. So I thought there would be a period in the middle where it would be really hard to become an entrepreneur because your risks increase. So I took in 2013, after working for MAS for 2 years, saved up a little bit of money and put that into the business and started my journey as an entrepreneur in the hiring technology space. So this is my second business. In fact, Impress.ai is my second business with the same co-founders in the recruiting and hiring tech space.
Specific to the recruitment and hiring tech space, why that interest and not going into a textile business?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's worth mentioning that my first business actually did not start in the hiring tech space. It was actually a platform for open innovation that I'd started. And it was something that was an idea that I'd continued through university. I was organizing certain competitions for ideas when I was in NTU. It is something I had started with my girlfriend at that time, and who's my wife now. And we were doing these online competitions to get ideas for companies for building new products and solving difficult technology problems. So we were able to get quite a bit of interest from masters and PhD students who wanted to solve these problems in return for some awards and recognition. Now that's where it started, and slowly that became something that companies want to hire from. Even after university, I paused it for a while, and when I quit my job at MAS, that's what I restarted. And the idea was that companies who were talking to us wanted to actually hire the people who were winning these competitions. So they said, I don't really care as much about the idea as I do about this person. I want them to work for me and produce this innovation in my company. So that was a spark where we thought that we could fit into an existing business model where we're helping companies evaluate candidates through an innovative method. So we did that for a while. I would say, it had a certain level of success, but it reached a ceiling very quickly. What we learned through that, though, was very important. We learned to sell to large enterprises. It's very important to get their trust in enterprise. We learned enterprise sales essentially. We sold to 10 or 15 large companies in Singapore, in India, in the US. We worked with major banks. And that's the number one skill I picked up from their enterprise sales. The second thing we learned was that recruiting was broken in ways that we could fix. The three co-founders, my co-founders are both PhD in computer science. I only have a bachelor. So we had a technical background, all three of us. And we didn't assume that we'd be able to get into a new industry, recruiting, and pretend that we know enough to solve problems. But from that first business, we developed some unique perspective. If I go deeper into that perspective, the first thing we noticed was that recruiters and overall recruiting organizations and large companies were handling a ton of different roles. So 30 to 40 different roles at any given point, where overall they're hiring many different people and there are hundreds of people applying. In many cases, there were hundreds of people applying for single jobs. So overall, the scale of that problem was really difficult for recruiters to handle. The second was there was a large variety of roles. So the same recruiters would be hiring for sales, for developers, for data science, and we would see them struggle to keep up with the knowledge in all of these areas. It's really hard for someone to be an expert in all of these different areas when all of these different areas are developing in their own ways. There's new technologies coming up every day. Best practices are changing every few years. So that was another problem we saw. The third part was the operational difficulty of handling different systems. So they were working on applicant tracking systems, they were working with various assessments, and they had to somehow find a way to coordinate all of these with the hundreds of candidates that they were talking to and they had to maintain a relationship with. At the same time, they had to keep the hiring managers updated. So it was like balancing a lot of balls in midair, and we thought we could solve that. Lastly, and I would say the most important point, was that all of this was leading to recruiters being forced to take shortcuts in some cases. So the scale of hiring was so high in many of these cases that recruiters were being forced to prioritize resumes. A lot of candidates would apply, but they would go through only enough candidates to make their shortlist, just enough to hire. So a lot of candidates won't even be considered. And that is our society denying opportunity to people for the same role. So there was this aspect of fairness that we wanted to enable. We thought if we remove the operational difficulties to some extent, we can make opportunity or access to opportunity much fairer. And that's what we set out to do. So that's the origin story of Impress AI.
The taking shortcuts aspect is unfortunately true. Having come from a recruitment background before, I have seen many instances where the prioritization is very much on time to fill, and you just want to engineer as much as possible to the destination. And of course, in doing so, unfortunately, some people will fall through the crack. My understanding of chatbot, based on my limited interaction when I try to, do some customer support or maybe try to message the bank, it's usually not a fantastic conversation. I guess in the banking environment, it's still okay. I want to check on my credit card, I want to check on my bank statement. But when it comes to recruiting, I would imagine a candidate would have a lot more questions which you cannot really predefine in the data bank. Wouldn't that create another problem altogether?
Yeah, I empathize with you totally. I've been through those systems. I think a lot of us have been through those systems, which possibly is a trend that will continue. It's a technology that is spreading really fast, which talks to its success as well. Now, what I did want to mention is that when we started in 2017, that's the idea that clicked with people. It's the idea that the chatbot was producing a certain kind of experience that was producing positive results in recruiting, because a lot of candidates won't hear back. And in this case, you had an automated system which could interview candidates in a conversational manner. So that was something that caught a lot of our prospective clients' attention, and it got us quite a bit of success. Now, we are actually going through a repositioning exercise at Impress AI. We've become a lot more since the time we started. So yes, we started with something that was a conversational interface to interview candidates, and that's possibly our neatest trick so far. But over time that we've worked with tens of large enterprises, there's been a huge evolution in what we do today. So if I were to define Impress AI today, I would say Impress AI is a recruiting automation platform for growing companies that makes accurate hiring possible through autonomous skills-based interviews. That's a bit of a mouthful, but I think the most important points there are we have become essentially a workflow automation tool specialized for recruiting. The most important part there is one where we enable skills-based hiring. And why that is important is because when we were starting out with Impress AI, we built the entire architecture of the product to enable competency-based or skills-based evaluations. So when you set up a role on Impress AI, you are able to take advantage of existing workflows that you can edit. And these workflows are built based on the roles that you can hire for on Impress AI. So if you're hiring a salesperson, for example, in the finance industry, let's say at a bank, you'd have an existing workflow on Impress AI built for that. And you can edit that self-service. Now, what you're getting there is that when you use that kind of a workflow and you add multiple competencies to that based on our competency framework, based on our interview questions database that we have on the platform, you are essentially scaling up the ability to interview candidates based on their skills. Those are required for the job. So that's, I think, the most important part. The chatbot happens to be just a way to collect information, and it's a great engaging way to collect information. But ultimately, that's what it is for us. The magic actually happens when you have collected that data, the insights you're able to generate from that, and also the ability to create workflows, self-service very quickly and launch them instantly. So I think one potential point to mention there is even companies who use chat-based platforms or platforms which have a conversational element to, there's this assumption that there's a lot of training data required. With Impress AI, we have pre-trained models. That's one. Two, it learns on the fly. So you can launch Impress AI within minutes of signing up. So I could open the platform right now and launch a new conversational workflow within minutes. So I think those are some of the things that have happened over the past couple of years, and we've become a much wider system than we used to be.
I was just doing some basic calculation, assuming it takes a human being 15 minutes to screen a candidate. At best, this person can go through 32 screening conversations a day, 8 hours, no lunch, nothing. How many candidates can Impress.ai screen over the same 8 hours?
We are currently doing 1,000 to 2,000 conversations a day. The scale that Impress AI can handle for its clients is matched by what a human would be able to do. We would say that those 15 minutes per candidate are spent much better with shortlisted candidates, and maybe those minutes should be turned into a longer conversation with the candidates who have gone through a system like Impress AI, where Impress AI has qualified them, shortlisted them based on certain key criteria, and those conversations can be a lot more productive. That's really the scale we're talking about. We have there are two aspects I wanted to mention. The scale is very important, but there is a more important aspect which I'll come back to. Now, on the scale side, there are clients where our clients are they'll open up the role and then they start getting 400 candidates applying a day, for instance, because there's a lot of buzz around this company or that the role is very interesting, very exciting. And all of these 400 would be interviewed on the same day by Impress AI. And the next day, you'd have a list of candidates who have been auto-scored and auto-prioritized, and you're able to respond to all of these candidates by using categories on the platform itself. It really helps with the scale portion of things. The other aspect that I wanted to circle back to is the accuracy aspect. So we have a lot of clients, including ourselves, our company, we use our own software to hire, of course, where we don't have a lot of candidates per role because our employer brand is, of course, a lot smaller than our client's employer brand since we're a smaller company. So we'll get tens of candidates per role, maybe sometimes even less. And a lot of focus needs to go on to sourcing. But what really works in that situation is the accuracy aspect, where you're able to evaluate each candidate objectively by making them go through this workflow on Impress AI. Um, and when you have face-to-face conversations or live conversations with them, you have this information already. You have a sense of objective measurement of the candidate's capabilities and their skills for the role. So, and we actually do have to market our company a little bit to the candidates in the first conversation. So, if we have, say, 10 candidates who applied for a role or candidates who haven't even applied for the role, we'll go and talk to them and get them excited about a future at Impress AI. But then we ask all of them, including senior candidates, to go through our Impress AI interview because we know that's objective.
And as we are in this new norm of hybrid work and working from home, has this entire change of scenario impacted or affected the way people recruit and how your software is helping them?
Definitely. That's a great question. So what we've noticed is I think there's a lot more interviews happening. So we're seeing this across the board. And I think you have pointed out, Adrian, in your recent LinkedIn post as well, that companies are doing more and more interview rounds. And we think that the main reason that is happening is that people are just not getting enough or they're just getting a lower fidelity of data from the virtual recruiting that they're being forced to do. So let me take the example of work from home in the non-hiring sense. So when we collaborate with our co-work, when we're working on certain creative projects or problem solving, it is much more difficult in a virtual setting or over a small screen with Zoom on there to collaborate effectively. We all probably miss working in the office with a large whiteboard where you can observe your coworkers' body language, you can observe their expressions very carefully when you say something so that you can test ideas and you feel safe because you're getting a lot of data on their body language. You're getting a lot of feedback through that process. Now, once that turns into a virtual setting, you have this 2D environment where a lot of data is just wiped. While we're talking, Adrian, on this podcast, I'm actually animatedly, gesticulating in the air, but you don't have the benefit of seeing that, right? So if we were having this conversation over coffee in reality, you'd be able to see how excited I am about while talking about this. So that's missing a lot of times from lower dimension or low fidelity conversations, which we are being forced to have right now while we work from home. I think it's getting better, of course, with newer and newer tools coming, and there's this talk of metaverse kind of work where you can live and talk in a virtual environment. Maybe that'll solve problems, but I think that's a bit far off. So coming back to the point, I think employers are struggling to get enough fidelity of data when they have these interview conversations. So they're forced to have more and more of those so that they keep collecting more data to get that comfort and that trust going for them. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we solved that at Impress AI because as a small company, we cannot afford to put people through so many rounds. They will go and look for another job. They'll accept another role while we are interviewing them. And that's happened with us in the past. So we have to force ourselves to limit to 3 to 5 rounds, depending on the seniority for the role. We really cannot go beyond that. Otherwise, somebody else will give them an offer and we'll lose a really good candidate. So what we do is we're very serious about our job descriptions. Since we're in the business, we're really by the book on this. We do a proper job analysis, and this job analysis is really doing desk research and talking to people as to what kind of skills we may need to look for when we're hiring for a new role. And in this case, I'm talking about a role which we don't have experience hiring for. So, for example, I don't have a lot of experience hiring for marketing. So I have to do a lot of desk research to understand what I need to be looking for. And I need to take into account the needs of the company. Of course, if we're hiring a developer, then we know how to do that very often because we've done that very often. But in our case, we will do this research, we'll go through that thinking and discussion internally before writing the job description. And our job descriptions are specific, they're accurate. We spend a lot of time on that. And before we even launch the role, we know what process we're going to use to hire the candidate, how many roles we'll go through, what the chat-based interview will look like on Impress AI for that role, because we've mapped out the skills, knowledge, and experience we're looking for already in the job description. So job description is very important in making accurate hiring happen. From that point onwards, we've set a good foundation, and the chat-based interview that is set up on Impress AI, that really helps to collect the accurate information that we need. So when we do interviews, live interviews, the non-chat interviews that we're talking about, we have this entire report from our own platform where we've asked specific questions about the candidate's past experience in projects, about their relevant experience and skills, and they've been assessed by using certain questions on the platform itself. And we also know what questions they asked on the platform about the company, about the culture. So we have a really good idea of whom we are talking to and what they're capable of when we actually do the live interview with the shortlisted candidate. So that makes our process a lot tighter, and we have the relevant data at our hands, and we don't have to spend a lot of time getting to just know the candidate in the interview. We don't have to spend a lot of time just getting background information on them because we already have it from the start. So that way we've been able to have a very accurate hiring process at Impress AI with very high retention rates without having to do 10 interviews.
One of the things that you also highlighted in our previous correspondence is beside the methods that you use to assess the relevance, competency, skills, knowledge, and experience, you would also ask structured questions during job interviews. Could you define what's structured interview and what are some of the questions that you may be asking those candidates?
Definitely. So structured interviews actually at the genesis of Impress AI, really. And I was talking about our origin story earlier. One of the aspects that I skipped over is that we saw that a lot of interviews that were happening, whether it be from hiring managers or from recruiters, were unstructured, meaning that they're just having a conversation which is not really very well planned out, and they haven't really given a lot of thought to what answers they're looking for, what's a good answer, what's not a good answer. Now, IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology, has put in quite a bit of research to say that, which has concluded that structured interviews really help with objective and accurate hiring. It's something like it doubles or triples. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it really increases the likelihood of an accurate hire when you do structured interviews versus unstructured interviews. So what does a structured interview mean? It means that you already know what skills, experience, and knowledge you're looking for in the candidate, which is required for the role based on your job analysis. And when you ask the questions, you're going to ask the same questions to all the candidates that you're interviewing. You also have pre-planned follow-up questions, and you have different kinds of elements in there which may be either situational judgment questions or behavioral questions. Situational judgment questions may present the candidate with a situation at the job which may happen at the actual job, and you ask the candidate what their reaction would be, how they would handle that situation. And then you have this structure called STAR: situation, task, action, and result, which helps you get the right information from the candidate for either a situational or a behavioral question. Behavioral questions, on the other hand, not situations, but behavioral questions ask the candidate about things that have happened in their past experience, in their previous roles, which show certain aspects. So you may ask a candidate as a behavioral question, has there ever been a time where you've had to step on your colleague's toes to achieve an objective, something like that. So that's where the candidate would have some time to think, and they would talk about that particular situation. And you're trying to look for certain aspects. You're trying to usually look for something which shows you whether this candidate would be able to stand up for their objective, stand up for their opinion, or would they be avoiding conflict so much that they would give in and not meet the objective. So you're trying to look for those aspects. So a good structured interview would have pre-planned questions and use techniques like the ones I just mentioned. And you have pre-planned follow-ups, and you have a grading sheet in your hand or on your laptop where you're able to rate these answers on a scale of, say, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. And of course, it's important for different interviews to agree on that scale and what kind of model answers you're looking for, so that your scoring is largely consistent with each other. So that's really a high-level overview of structured interviewing.
And I'm sure with all those processes put in place, your hiring accuracy must be pretty high. Are you able to give us an indication of what's your company's retention rate or even your Glassdoor rating?
Yeah, but we've managed to grow from about 30 plus people at the start of this year to about 85 now. Our Glassdoor ratings have stayed above 4.5, so we're in the high fours. And that's really a source of pride for us because our company is very much based on certain shared values. And that's really what works. Everybody knows our mission, or at least we try to make sure everybody knows our mission, and it matters to the people who work in our company. In fact, when we're coming up with product ideas, we have people in the company asking, hey, is this, do you really think this makes hiring fair or more accurate? So we have people asking that, and that's something that makes our company tick. On retention rates, I don't have the exact percentages, but we have, I think, probably over 90% retention rate within the first 3 months based on just rough calculations I'm doing in my head. Definitely, something's gone because we've grown 3x and we have people staying on and getting productive within the first.
In the previous podcast I had with Paradox, one was asking him the difference between theirs versus Impress solution because they are also in providing a chatbot software. Although they will call it a conversational assistant, but potato. And what was told to me is Impress is focusing very much on the middle of the funnel when it comes to the entire process. Of course, you have people coming in at the beginning, you have people who that you continue to speak with after they are being hired. Is that still the case?
So things have changed over the years. So when we were starting out, we saw a huge opportunity in that space where a lot of competitors or solutions in the market were really just very high level. So they were yes, we're probably talking about conversational solutions in this context because that's where we started from in 2017 as well. So we saw solutions which were just asking very basic questions to the candidate and about eligibility, whether they're looking or not looking. So there'd be 3 or 4 questions like that, and they'd just schedule an interview with the recruiter. So it was a very short kind of conversation with very limited value. We thought that it was generating for the recruiters and even for the candidate. Now that's where we saw. I'd call that a bit like top of the funnel approach because using it as a sourcing solution, like an inbound sourcing solution, and high level qualifying the candidates very lightly. So we saw an opportunity to go much deeper and actually interview the candidate. So we wanted to bring the structured interview to Impress AI, and that really was the goal. And that's how we got very strong in the mid funnel part of the solution, where we're engaging with the candidate, we're evaluating and assessing the candidate while delivering a great interactive experience to them. And then, of course, going all the way to late part of the funnel where we can help with onboarding the candidate as well and taking care of things when they start with the role, and in fact even going all the way up to giving them some of the information they need to get started on the company. So there's even a pre-boarding aspect. So yes, we started probably in that opportunity space, but over time we cover pretty much the whole funnel now, from when a candidate gets interested in a company, not even a specific role, right when a candidate gets interested in working for a company, all the way to when they've been hired. So we really own the whole experience now, and we're glad that we've been able to get there. So it's a much wider solution now, so I don't agree with that characterization probably.
With the latest funding they received around May this year, what's next for Impress? What can we expect and what can customers expect over coming years?
Great question. Yeah, we're very lucky to have gotten that fundraise in a difficult time for the. It's helped us to double our, more than double, in fact, our product org. So we're investing a lot into our product. We are responding to our customers' feedback, and we're making everything we have just far better designed, better features, delivering more on the KPIs that we set for ourselves with our customers, and just adding a lot more value within the same price point in many cases. I can't probably talk about the specific things that we're planning to release, but that's coming up in terms of going deeper into the employee life cycle. But mainly, I think if you were to talk about what we're most excited about, to be honest, is we're entering the SMB space. So we're actually using whatever we've built over the past couple of years, we're now very excited that we're able to bring it to a smaller size of companies. Earlier, we have been fully focused on the enterprise size companies with thousands of employees, multi-country presence, and we've gotten really good at that. But now we see the opportunity to bring that same accurate hiring possibility to smaller companies because we've benefited so much from it. So we're entering a new segment. It's still early days, and my fingers are crossed. We hope we're able to take accurate hiring to millions more. And on the other hand, we're entering new geographies. So we've opened an office in Australia. Huge market possibilities there. The size of the economy is much larger than Singapore's, for instance. So we expect to do a lot more business there. We're seeing a huge amount of activity there despite the lockdowns. So those two aspects are probably the most exciting and the ones I can talk about. On the product side, we'll continue to do launches, and you'll see some press releases in a couple of months of what we're releasing.
That sounds awesome. And of course, for people who are interested to find out more about Impress.ai, you can simply go to their website, impress.ai, and be able to find out more about what they do. And also, I'll be putting a link into the show notes where you can have a chance to interact with their AI chatbot to have a sense of how it works. And with that, thank you so much, Sudh, for your time today. Lovely speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Adrian.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. You can refer to the show notes for links to more information about our guests and their businesses. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would be helpful to give a review on iTunes or follow me on Spotify. If you're using Overcast, please hit the star button under the episode. That will help get this episode and podcast out to more people who may find it useful. I'll see you in the next episode of The Adrian Han Show.